Okay, so let's see what I can fill you in here on your knowledge of a miter saw. Okay, so a miter saw has become quite common. That's because, it's quite economically, attainable. You can buy a compound miter saw for, $200 as a mastercraft or something like that, or, $500 or $600 will get you a good Makita or a DeWalt or a Bosch or something like that. And they do all kinds of things, which I'm hoping to show you. It's kind of an evolution from a radial arm saw. Radial arm saws are still awesome, but again, they cost a lot of money, new. You can get them pretty cheap at auctions and things like that. But they've kind of been replaced by the compound miter saw. So, compound miter saw, what makes it so useful? All right, it is accurate for many things. From the name, let's just go through the name here. Compound miter saw, and this is our last video, we realized that we can turn the table to do a miter across the face of some material, and then we can also in some way, obviously if it's a compound miter saw, we can find a way to bevel the saw, to miter the saw to the side as well, to create a compound miter in which it's going to cut a miter across the face and across the edge of the material as well, and make that cut for us. So that's easy enough to understand. We could make our cut here if we were that compound miter saw cut that we wanted to make before. Got a laser on mine, so I can tilt. And I don't ever use the laser for accuracy. When I turn it, I always use the scale here. And now there's a couple things. Last video we talked about that we figured out a 312 was 14 degrees. So I could set 14 degrees if I wanted to, but I don't always do that. There are many other ways in which, oh bugger, not very good at making videos. There are many other ways in which to set your compound miter saw to set that miter. And there are compound miter saws that will, like my Bosch over here, that will read off, different pitches. You can set it 412, 212. The one at the school has all of them. This one doesn't have a 312. So again, I guess it doesn't really do everything that you want it to do. But another way to do it, if for example you didn't know any of those things, you didn't know the degrees measurement, and you weren't given a pitch measurement on your compound miter saw, another way to do it that I've often done is you have your sliding T-bevel, right? You can bring down your blade. Obviously, you could shut the power off if you wanted to, or you lock it down, and then you can simply use the sliding T-bevel to, hit your blade and steal that angle, like so, against your blade, and now you know that you've got the 312 pitch on the compound miter saw, which, yes, turns out to be 14 degrees. Okay, so that's an angle across the face. Should have that one. And now we just need to get our miter across the edge. And so there's always a way. Now the one thing about no compound miter saw is exactly the same, but there's some way that you have to figure out how to put a miter on the tilt here. I'm so bad, I always want to call it a bevel, but it's not. All right, so I've got a protractor back here as well, so I'm gonna mark that to 14 degrees. And same thing, you could tilt it to a sliding T-bevel and get that angle. So here we go. When using a compound miter saw, you again have a saw curve width, so you want to keep your saw blade on a certain side of the line, the waist side of the line. And so I always bring down the blade before I start, and I pick one tooth on the saw, and I put that one tooth on my mark, and blade to the waist side. And when I'm happy where it's going to cut, I bring the saw all the way to the top, and I'm going to make that cut. There we go. Now the thing to realize about the safety aspects of the compound miter saw is really to think about the forces of it. When this saw comes down, this blade spinning, you can imagine that when that blade is coming around and hitting the piece of material, it's going to hit the piece and try to lift the piece up and also slam it back. So where you get into trouble with kickback situations is where the piece of material is not against the fence. When the blade hits it, it will kick it back, or it will close up on your blade, pinching the blade, which is what causes kickback, and kick the blade back at you. So you want to make sure that your fence is clean and clear of any debris. And then when you're holding it, you want to make sure you're holding it against the fence. Now the other thing that we said is when the blade hits it, it's going to try to pull it up. So you cannot not hold your piece down. So pushing against the fence and pushing it down. Now be careful that your hand isn't too close. I always say about a fist length away. You don't want to be too far away because then it's just, you'll teeter up and on you. So about a fist length away, you're going to hold that piece of material tight against the fence, tight against the table, and so that when you make that cut and that blade spins and hits it, you should be fine, taking care of all the forces. All right, so that should be good. So I mean, there's a compound miter saw cut, compound miter cut. That's, you know, what the saw was meant to do. There are some things though that this saw does that are very convenient for us. And again, I love my hand tools, but and we could back saw this, and then we could chisel this out and get a beautiful dado cut, compound miter dado cut, if that's what you want to call it. And we could do that. But I just want to point out a couple other things you can do with the miter saw. And one of them is, one that people don't usually use it for, is for a depth stop type cut, like a dado cut. And so every saw, somewhere in here, in its pivot, will have a depth stop, all right? So now this depth stop, I can simply, you know, with it not in, when it's not in, I'm not using it, it's going to cut right through. And I don't want to cut right through, so I'm going to pull it to the side, and now this stopper is going to hit, and it will not go all the way through. It's been set from something else, so I'm going to, you know, I can simply turn this threading to change where it's going to stop for depth, okay? On different saws, but every compound miter saw has it. So now I already know I want to go 3/8 deep. There's no way to like exactly set this to 3/8 the first time. It's more of like a test, right? The only other thing that I could do is I could mark, oh, I never have a pencil in either. I could mark 3/8 deep on the end grain, so I could steal this 3/8, bring it around to the end grain, and I could mark 3/8 deep. And I could set my saw that way, you know, so there we go. I'm gonna keep putting the saw up until I've got 3/8 deep. And again, I could not go as deep and then go deeper, but there. So it's going to stop at that depth. And now what's going to happen, you see I've added a piece behind. That's because without a backer piece, when the saw is not set to full depth, you can see it doesn't actually finish the cut here because of the radius shape of the blade, the circular blade. So I just have to pull the piece out a bit to here, and obviously this is not safe. You can't freehand this because when the blade hits it, it'll shoot it back. You can't hold that. So I've got a random backer piece I'm willing to sacrifice here. So now I'm going to, you know, use that backer piece so that I can, you know, roll this cut right through and plow this out. So I should have my depth. I should have my compound miter angle. So let's just see how this dado works out here, okay? So line it up again with one tooth and go back to the top. So now I've plowed out most of the material, you know, between the two lines. Okay, nice, pretty clean. If you really want to clean it up, if you're confident enough, you can actually go back and forth. So I'm just going to start up the blade. And you could clean up your cut like so. And another way, like you could find a flat file and you could file that flat, or play with the chisel and chisel it flat if you have a good sharp chisel. And there we go. So not only does it cross cut, not only does it miter cut, but not only does it compound miter cut, But you can also do really good dados with it. There's a lot of things you should not do with a compound miter saw, and most of them involve, you know, any type of along the grain type cutting, like ripping, you know, across a long board, where you don't have very much against the fence and things like that. But for cross-cutting operations, very, very good. All right, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of what I wanted to show you with the types of cuts for the sawhorse leg that you would be doing. Thanks for watching.